Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We now have just 18 hours left in Donald Trump's presidency. And on this, the final full day that Trump is in office, we passed a horrific milestone when it relates to COVID. The virus has now claimed 400,000 Americans and counting. And the president's handling and mishandling of the pandemic will be one of the things he will be remembered for. Tonight, we will show you what to expect tomorrow as Joe Biden takes the oath of office during an inauguration that will be different, well, more different than anything we've ever seen. Also, former counsel to President Clinton, who also worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee when Joe Biden was chairman, he will weigh in tonight on Trump's expected pardons, the legal exposure Trump could face once he leaves the White House, and also whether or not the Biden administration ought to pursue Trump and his cronies after they leave the Oval. Also, a domestic terror expert will tell us about the ongoing threats since what we saw on January 6th, including to the inauguration and also the toxic stew of hate groups and extremists that are operating in this country as we speak. We'll also talk about the past 4 years, including President Trump's abuses of power, shatterings of norms, mishandling of a pandemic, and much, much more. But we begin this hour with some significant words from, surprisingly, Mitch McConnell. He said this on the floor of the Senate today.
The last time the Senate convened, we had just reclaimed the Capitol from violent criminals who tried to stop Congress from doing our duty. The mob was fed lies. They were provoked by the president and other powerful people.
McConnell with his strongest words yet about the Capitol riot and the president's role in inciting it. The Senate Majority Leader, who's just a day away from getting stripped of that title once Democrats take over tomorrow, still has not said whether or not he will vote to convict Donald Trump. But as you heard there, he not only has a ton of sway with the Republican caucus, and 17 of them needed to join Democrats to convict Trump, but he's also seemingly giving a green light to those Republicans who want to do so. It is unclear how this trial will play out. Speaker Pelosi expected to send the articles of impeachment to the Senate this week. That could trigger, or would trigger, I should say, the start of the trial, which will begin the very next day at 1 p.m. That means the impeachment trial will coincide with Joe Biden's first days in office, a time when he will be hitting the ground running with a slew of executive orders, the push for a $2.2 trillion COVID relief package, a Senate working on confirming his nominees for cabinet, and a whole lot more. I want to bring in my first guest. He is a man who will have a vote on all those things I mentioned, Senator Chris Van Hollen. He a Democrat from Maryland. Senator, I'm curious, when you heard what Mitch McConnell said from the floor of the Senate, he directly laid blame not just at the president, but also the president's enablers in high power. Did you read that as a permission slip for Republicans to vote for conviction, or that it was, I'll condemn it, but I won't convict?
Well, he certainly placed responsibility exactly where it belongs, with the President of the United States for inciting the violent mob to undermine our democracy, and his accomplices in the Senate and the House, Republican members who helped feed the lie and work to overturn the election. How he will vote, I don't know, but certainly he laid out the case for conviction in the Senate.
You know, I noticed that you come from a family of public service. Both your parents served in both Foreign Service and also CIA, so obviously government was something that was important. And I think the idea of faith in government has been attacked over the last 4 years more than any window of time I remember. And even the president refusing to even go to the inauguration tomorrow, deprive at least an imprimatur of legitimacy to it. But I also see that it's going to carry over. Senator Hawley today, one of the instigators of what we saw a couple weeks ago, he refused and single-handedly to get the Department of Homeland Security Secretary confirmed in an expedited manner as we're going through real threats about, well, I don't have to tell anyone, just look at what the Capitol looks like right now. How much of what Trump preached will survive when he's gone?
Well, I'm very worried that you're going to have some Republican senators who continue to be in tow with Donald Trump. What you see from people like Senator Hawley and Senator Cruz are people who refuse to tell their constituents the truth because they want to somehow inherit the Donald Trump followers. This is a very dangerous and worrisome development. We see it, as you say, with Senator Hawley now blocking the vote on the Secretary for Homeland Security. Look, Senator Hawley is free to ask whatever questions he wants. He's also free to vote against the nomination. But at this moment, when we just had this inside attack on our Capitol, when you have the rise of these right-wing extremist groups, and when we have a transition of power from one president to the next, it's really important that we have a Secretary of Homeland Security in place.
You know, I was looking back. It's a little over 10 years ago that Senator McConnell said his biggest priority was, in effect, to see Obama only being a one-term president, seeing that he wouldn't fail in his policies. Do you think the tone's different given what President Biden's inheriting? We just passed 400,000 deaths with COVID. It has been a disaster, the rollout of the vaccine. We know the economic pain in this country right now, and we see the rise of this extremism that I don't have to re-articulate for the millionth time. Do people want him to succeed across party aisles given the stakes right now, or is it still as polarized as it ever was?
Well, I certainly hope there will be a commitment to helping the country succeed. And that means working in partnership with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, tackling those huge issues of defeating the coronavirus pandemic, getting our economy up and running again. The jury's still out on whether or not, Senate Republicans and other Republicans in Congress will take President Biden's extended hand and work in partnership. We've got a lot of work to do as a country. What I can do is hope right now, but only time will tell as to whether or not people will actually deliver. And I know Joe Biden will work to achieve that. I'm certainly going to work to try to achieve that. But, too much of what we've seen over the last, 4 years and 4 weeks, worries me greatly about whether or not that unity will happen.
Senator, given the laundry list that I mentioned and so much more, if 100 days from now you and I talk and Biden has at least put adults into the important positions, we have not only a functioning government, but through executive order or however we redo some of these horrible policies put in place over the last 4 years, is that enough? Or does he have to go much farther? We all know, you have a limited window of time in Washington, especially with the makeup of the House and the Senate right now, to get things done. How should we judge, and how will you judge success or not over the first 100 days of this administration?
Well, as you say, we have a very ambitious agenda. First step is to mobilize the federal resources at the national level to defeat the coronavirus and pass the next round of economic relief. That's got to be job number one. But within the first 100 days, I'm hopeful that President-elect Biden will also send up his second round of Build Back Better, the better part, a major infrastructure modernization plan. We also need to move forward on really urgent matters of social justice and racial equality. The House passed many important measures over the last 4 years that have been stuck in the United States Senate. We now have the opportunity to at least try to bring those up for a vote. But getting back to your earlier question, whether Senator McConnell and others will now work to obstruct those, we just don't know yet. So a lot of work to do. And we'll measure early results by how quickly we defeat this pandemic, save lives, so many of which have been unnecessarily lost, and then get the economy up and moving again.
Finally, we do all this, Senator, with the open question of impeachment. What do you say, and I think Senator Sass is probably the best example, he condemned in the strongest words the president and the president's role in those riots. But yet he said, we need to move on. Let's turn the page when Biden's in there. Let's forget about a trial and a conviction for the then former president, Trump. Explain why it's important in your eyes that the Senate uses its valuable time here to put him on trial and to convict.
Well, I think it's fundamentally necessary that we send the unmistakable message as a country to people now and also to future generations and leaders that it is unacceptable when the President of the United States incites people to violence for the purpose of undermining our democracy. In this case, the purpose of disrupting and overturning the count from the Electoral College. That's what this was all about, trying to block our democracy. And even if the president has left office, as he will have, I think it's important that the Senate convict him for these seditious acts. And there's nothing that prevents us from both holding President Trump accountable and moving on in the country. We just need to work harder and longer hours in the United States Senate. And we need some cooperation in pursuing this double track process. But we can work longer days and longer nights and get the business of the country done, as we also send a very strong message about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, what's constitutional and what's not constitutional.
Well, I don't know if there's enough hours in the day for everything that you have in front of you, but I appreciate you making a few minutes for us today. Senator, thank you so much.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
All right. Up next, one of our favorite guests and one of the top legal minds from the Clinton White House. He'll join us to discuss Trump's pardons that we're waiting for, both Trump's legal exposure once he leaves office and all the other issues awaiting him once he becomes a private citizen.